things that I'd been most afraid of about Christianity when I began to realize that intellectually and imaginatively I was moving closer towards it. Though I don't think I would have ever got there if God hadn't intervened in the way that he did when I was reading the Psalm. But one of the things that I feared about the whole possibility of becoming a Christian again was, I mean, I had feared that it would be intellectual suicide, and I knew now from Augustine that it wouldn't be. But I was afraid of stasis, do you know what I mean? Of everything coming to a full stop. That, you know, I found the answer, I've ticked the box, I've said the prayer, you know, there need be no further disturbance of the grey matter. You know, that idea, which was, I have to say, an impression that some ardent young Christians gave me, that they'd now found the solution to everything. They were absolutely right about everything. Everybody else was absolutely wrong about it. And they wouldn't question it in any way. I didn't like that. I found that repellent. The only thing that kept me going with some sense that that might not be the case, actually, was the end of The Last Battle by C.S. Lewis, because in the course of all that, I also reread all the Narnia books. And that great cry further up and further in, and that picture of Aslan's country of heaven as this kind of running up waterfalls and getting higher and higher and closer to the source, that was deeply attractive. And I think that's a better picture of heaven than, you know, everybody standing around with a harp singing hymn 5084. You know, that was attractive. And happily, that proved to be the case. You know, C.S. Lewis, St. Augustine's, one of his great dicta was credo ut intelligam, which means I believe in order to understand. I won't arrive at belief by the act of understanding, because as belief is transcendent, it comes as a gift. But now I believe I've got somewhere to think from. I've got a new, and as it turns out, brilliant and beautiful way of interpreting experience in the world. And everything has to be reappraised and reimagined in the light of faith. You reread all the literature you loved, including non-Christian literature, and you find all kinds of movements of the spirit in it. You listen to all the albums you've loved again, and you think, oh, wow, you know. So there was what began and then and has continued to this day was a great new, as it were, intellectual and imaginative work of discovery and rediscovery, in which I get out of this kind of immanent frame materialist mindset and begin to see everything in the light of Christ. And then, of course, you start reading epistles like Colossians, and you say, you know, he is the first of all things. In him, all things cohere, all things hold together, everything. You know, so that became, you know, it became an intellectual adventure. But of course, it also was a challenge morally, and I needed to be, you know, lay everything down at the feet of Christ and take some things up again and not others. And all of that had to be done. You know, and I was a school teacher for a while. I thought that was what I was called to do. And then I thought maybe I was called to preach. So I became a lay preacher, a lay reader. But eventually I realized that God was in fact calling me to the priesthood. And I also realized that that deep desire I'd had ever since the Keats experience to be a poet myself was also part of that calling. And it took me a while to work out how priesthood and poethood, as it were, worked together. George Herbert was, of course, and John Donne were extremely helpful in that they were both Anglican priest poets. So I realized this was a thing. I mean, one of the, well, no, it's not a very frequent thing, but it is a thing. And one of the things that had kept me from thinking I should be ordained was I couldn't see anybody among the clergy of the Church of England at the time I was thinking about it that looked or felt remotely like me. But on the other hand, I thought if there's space for John Donne, who's a great love poet, but also then there must be a niche for me somewhere. And so I went forward with it, and I was ordained 10 years after my confirmation in 1990. One of the advantages of that actually was that I've ended up having 3 goes at Cambridge rather than 1, because I was there at the end of the 70s to read English literature, and then I was there at the end of the 80s to do theology. And then at the end of the 90s, I came back to be a chaplain and a lecturer. And I've sort of been there ever since, except I retired from Cambridge a couple of years ago, allegedly. So yeah, that's a little bit of an arc.